My parents ignored me for 15 years, until they saw my $30 million empire on TV, then invited me to Christmas after watching my interview on the Morning Business Show, where I talked about how I built my medical technology company alone, sleeping in my car while coding the first prototypes. In the family WhatsApp group I had been removed from years ago, my mother wrote, "Darling, save December 25th for us. Your room is exactly as you left it." But when I arrived at their mansion in Scarsdale, I discovered they had invited investors and the family lawyer to convince me to make my older brother, who had just gotten out of rehab for the third time, CFO of the company. I served the turkey I had brought, announced I was selling everything to Johnson & Johnson for $300 million, and that my only condition was that no family member could be hired by the company for the next 50 years. The silence in my parents' marble-floored dining room was so complete I could hear ice melting in crystal glasses. My mother's Botoxed face attempted shock, her fork suspended midway to her mouth. My father, Robert Rodriguez, senior vice president at Morgan Stanley, went the color of the Bordeaux he'd been bragging about minutes earlier. My brother Derek swayed slightly in his chair, his pupils dilated in a way that suggested his 90-day rehab stint had been wildly unsuccessful. But it was Leonard Pritchard, the family lawyer who'd drawn up my parents' will that deliberately excluded me at age 13, whose reaction satisfied me most. His arthritic fingers crushed the napkin in his lap, and a thin line of sweat appeared above his carefully groomed mustache. Beside him, William Hoffman, the venture capitalist my parents had somehow convinced to fly in from Silicon Valley for a family dinner, set down his wine glass with enough force to crack the stem. I carved into the organic free-range turkey I'd brought from Whole Foods. The one my mother had initially protested wasn't fancy enough for their Christmas table. The knife made a satisfying sound against the porcelain serving platter. Steam rose from the perfectly golden skin, and I made sure to serve the breast meat first, just as my mother had taught Derek but never me. My father recovered first, his investment banker persona sliding into place like armor. "Maya, sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We invited you home because we miss you. The investors are here because you promised them equity in my company if they convinced me to bring Derek on as CFO." I placed a slice of turkey on William Hoffman's plate, meeting his eyes. "She told you I was desperate for family approval, didn't she? That I'd do anything to finally be accepted?" The venture capitalist had the decency to look uncomfortable. My mother made a small choking sound. "That's absurd," my father said, but his voice had lost its commanding edge. "We would never." The WhatsApp message was sent at 9:47 p.m. on December 10th. I continued, serving my mother next. 4 hours after my interview aired. 15 years of silence broken by exactly 63 words. Would you like me to read them aloud? Or should I skip to the part where you calculated that 10% of $300 million would set you up for retirement? Derek suddenly laughed, the sound sharp and chemical. "She's bluffing. Maya was always a dramatic little bitch. That's why we don't talk to her." I turned to my brother, this stranger who shared my DNA and nothing else. His designer sweater couldn't hide the weight he'd lost, or the tremor in his hands. "You're high right now. Cocaine, probably. The same substance that got you kicked out of your last startup after you embezzled $400,000 to pay your dealer." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Leonard Pritchard cleared his throat. "Maya, these are serious accusations. I'd be careful about defamation. I have the bank records." I placed the serving fork down with precision. "I also have photos of my childhood bedroom, the one that's exactly as I left it, which you converted into Derek's home gym approximately 10 years ago. The elliptical machine is positioned right where my bed used to be." My mother's hand flew to her throat, diamonds glittering at her wrist. "How did you—" "The same way I knew about this dinner before you invited me. The same way I knew Leonard brought conservatorship papers in his briefcase. The same way I knew William was promised my board seat." I pulled my phone from my purse, placing it face up on the table. "You see, when you're invisible for 15 years, you learn to pay attention. And when you sleep in your car writing code, you get really good at surveillance systems." The phone's screen showed a live audio feed, the waveforms pulsing with every word spoken in the room. "That turkey centerpiece you complimented?" I smiled. "It's been recording since I arrived. Every word, every scheme, every lie." My father's face had gone from red to ashen. "You can't. This is our home. New York is a one-party consent state for recordings. I'm the party." And I consented. I stood, smoothing my dress. "The Johnson & Johnson acquisition closes in 72 hours. The anti-nepotism clause is ironclad. Drafted by attorneys who actually passed their ethics requirements, Leonard. Not a single Rodriguez will touch that company for 50 years. You vindictive little—" Derek lunged across the table, but William Hoffman caught his arm. "She played us. the investor said quietly, something like admiration in his voice. She played all of us. I didn't play anyone. I picked up my coat from the back of my chair. I simply bet on you being exactly who you've always been. Congratulations, you didn't disappoint. My mother finally found her voice, thin and desperate. Maya, please. We're your family. Your blood. You stopped being my family the day you chose Derek's addiction over my science fair project. You stopped being my blood when you paid my MIT tuition only because it looked good on your Christmas cards. I built Neuroscan in a Toyota Camry while you built Derek's fourth trust fund. I walked toward the door, past the baccarat crystal and the fresh white roses and the life I'd never been invited to join. Enjoy your turkey. It pairs beautifully with betrayal. The snow was falling heavier now, covering the circular driveway and the Range Rover Derek had wrecked twice. My Uber driver waited at the gate, engine running. Behind me, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see them, frozen in their designer clothes and their calculated kindness, finally understanding they'd underestimated the daughter they'd thrown away. I climbed into the warm car, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt like I'd finally come home. The first time my parents forgot me wasn't dramatic. I was 12 years old, standing outside Roosevelt Middle School in the February cold, watching car after car pull up to collect other kids. My mother was supposed to pick me up at 3:15. By 5:30, the janitor found me shivering by the locked front doors and called my father's office. Maya? My father sounded confused when he answered. Why are you still at school? Because no one came to get me, I wanted to say. But I'd already learned that stating the obvious made me sound needy. Mom forgot. She's at Derek's lacrosse game. Big championship. Can you walk home? It was 4 miles. I walked. That night at dinner, Derek held court about his winning goal while my parents hung on every word. No one asked about my English test, the one where I'd gotten the only perfect score. The teacher had written exceptional analysis in red pen. I'd carried that test paper home like a trophy. It stayed in my backpack for 3 weeks before I threw it away. The pattern solidified over the next year. Derek's soccer games, Derek's debate tournaments, Derek's friends coming over to use the pool. I became the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who didn't need attention. At 13, my mother sat me down for what she called a family discussion, but was really a monologue about how Derek needed more support because he was sensitive and special. You understand, don't you, Maya? She'd patted my hand like I was a reasonable adult, not a child who wanted her mother to remember her birthday. You've always been so self-sufficient. I understood perfectly. Self-sufficient meant unwanted. By 14, I'd stopped trying to compete for their attention. I discovered the school library had computers with internet access and stayed there until closing every night. While Derek stumbled home drunk from parties my parents pretended not to notice, I taught myself to code. Python first, then Java, then C++. The languages made sense in ways my family never did. Input, output, logic, results. High school brought new levels of invisibility. My parents attended exactly 0 of my academic award ceremonies but never missed one of Derek's football games, even when he spent most of his senior year on the bench. I took the SAT without telling them, scoring in the 99th percentile. The acceptance letter from MIT arrived in March of my junior year, full scholarship plus stipend. I waited until dinner to share the news, my heart pounding with hope I should have known better than to feel. That's nice, honey, my mother said, not looking up from her phone. Derek, tell your father about the Columbia recruiter. My brother was barely maintaining a 2.8 GPA, but the Rodriguez family had donated to Columbia for 3 generations. Of course, they were recruiting him. MIT offered me a full ride, I said louder. Full tuition, housing, and a $15,000 annual stipend for research. My father finally looked at me. That's good. You'll need that money for expenses. We're covering Derek's Columbia costs, obviously, so we can't help much with yours. Derek smirked into his water glass. That night, I applied to every summer coding internship I could find. I landed one at a small tech startup in Boston, working 40 hours a week for $12 an hour, while living in a hostel with 6 other people. I was 17 years old and learned more about survival that summer than I had in my entire life at the Rodriguez mansion. MIT welcomed me in September 2019. My parents drove me to campus in silence, my mother checking her phone the entire 2-hour trip. They stayed for exactly 20 minutes, long enough to meet my roommate and take a single photo for their Christmas card. Then they left to pick Derek up from the Columbia freshman mixer. Love you, I called after them. Neither turned around. College became my salvation. I threw myself into my coursework with the desperation of someone who knew education was the only way out. I worked 3 part-time jobs, tutoring, research assistant, and weekend shifts at a coffee shop to cover my expenses and save every dollar possible. While other freshmen went to parties, I studied. While they traveled on spring break, I took extra courses. My parents called every few months, usually when they needed something. Could I explain Derek's computer science homework? Did I know how to fix their printer? My mother once called at 2 a.m, drunk, to tell me I should be more like my brother, more social, more normal. I hung up and went back to my neural network project. Sophomore year brought the idea that would change everything. I was working in the medical imaging lab, analyzing MRI scans for a neuroscience professor, when I noticed the pattern recognition software was flagging false positives at an alarming rate. The program couldn't distinguish between certain types of tissue abnormalities and normal variations. What if I could teach it better? What if machine learning could be trained on millions of scans to recognize the subtle differences doctors sometimes missed? I worked on the algorithm for 8 months, sleeping 4 hours a night, missing classes, surviving on vending machine food, and obsession. My advisor told me I was onto something significant. A visiting professor from Stanford called it revolutionary. I named it Neuroscan. By junior year, I had a working prototype and exactly $12,000 in savings. I needed more. Servers, processing power, medical data licensing, legal fees for patents. I needed family. I called home on Thanksgiving, gathering my courage. Dad, I have a business proposal. I've developed medical imaging software that could save lives. I need $50,000 for... Maya, it's a holiday. Can we talk about this another time? When? I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Your brother just got engaged. Patricia's planning the wedding. We're a little busy. Derek was 25 and on his 3rd failed startup, funded entirely by our parents, but he was getting married to a woman from a good family, and that mattered more than any algorithm. I didn't call home again for 9 months. Instead, I maxed out 2 credit cards, took a private loan at 18% interest, and rented the cheapest server space I could find. I graduated MIT at 22 with highest honors, 2 job offers from major tech companies, and a medical imaging platform that worked better than anything on the market. I turned down both job offers. 3 weeks after graduation, I packed everything I owned into my 2004 Toyota Camry and drove to Silicon Valley. I had $17,000 in debt, $8,000 in savings, and a revolutionary piece of technology no one had agreed to fund. I also had nothing left to lose. The Camry became my home for the next 11 months. I parked in different lots each night to avoid suspicion. Walmart parking lots, 24-hour gyms where I'd shower, quiet residential streets where no one asked questions. I worked from coffee shops and libraries, pitching my software to anyone who would listen. 43 venture capitalists said no. They were polite about it mostly. Too risky, too specialized, not enough business experience. One partner told me I should find a real CEO if I wanted to be taken seriously. I stopped sleeping in January 2023. I couldn't afford to. The breakthrough came from exhaustion. I'd been coding for 36 straight hours in a Starbucks in Palo Alto, surviving on black coffee and determination, when a woman in scrubs sat down at the next table. She was crying quietly, staring at her phone. I should have minded my own business, but something about her defeated posture reminded me of every time I'd felt invisible. "Are you okay?" I asked. She looked up, mascara smudged. "My patient died today, 18 years old. Brain tumor we didn't catch until it was stage 4. The imaging showed something 6 months ago, but the radiologist said it was probably nothing." She wiped her eyes. It wasn't nothing. I opened my laptop. "Can I show you something?" Dr. Samantha Porter became my first believer. She looked at my Neuroscan demo, running it on publicly available imaging data, and watched it flag anomalies that traditional software missed. She made me present to her department head at Stanford Medical Center. He made me present to the hospital board. 3 weeks later, Stanford signed a pilot program contract for $250,000. I cried in my car that night, the first real tears in years. The Stanford success opened doors. Other hospitals wanted pilots. Medical journals published early results showing Neuroscan caught 14% more abnormalities than existing technology. Suddenly, the same venture capitalists who'd dismissed me were returning calls. I took meetings with 9 firms before choosing Redwood Capital. They offered $3 million for 15% equity, and more importantly, they didn't try to replace me as CEO. I was 24 years old, homeless, and suddenly had money in the bank. The first thing I did was rent an apartment. 1 bedroom in Mountain View, 800 square feet of space that belonged to me. I bought a bed and cried again when I slept in it the first night. The second thing I did was call home. Maya! My mother sounded surprised. We were just talking about you. Derek's getting divorced. Can you believe it? We need to discuss the prenup situation. I'm calling to tell you I raised $3 million for my company. That's nice, dear. Now about Derek's legal fees. I hung up. Neuroscan grew faster than I'd planned. By 25, we had contracts with 47 hospitals across 12 states. By 26, we'd expanded internationally. I hired brilliant people, made hard decisions, learned to trust my instincts over everyone's advice. I also hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus Thompson, former FBI, and I paid him $15,000 to do a complete background check on my entire family. I told myself it was about protecting my company from potential liability. Really, I needed to understand who they were when they thought no one was watching. The report arrived in February 2024. My father had been investigated twice for insider trading, never charged. My mother's real estate deals involved suspicious cash transactions with shell companies. And Derek, my golden child brother, had embezzled $412,000 from his last startup before it collapsed. The other founders had accepted a quiet settlement rather than face the publicity of prosecuting a Rodriguez. My family wasn't just neglectful. They were corrupt. I locked the report in my office safe and kept building. By November 2024, Neuroscan was processing imaging for over 300 medical facilities. Our AI had helped diagnose thousands of conditions early, saving lives daily. Revenue hit $30 million. Profit margin was 38%. We were approached by medical device companies, insurance providers, and pharmaceutical giants interested in acquisition. Johnson & Johnson offered $300 million. I told them I'd think about it, then did something impulsive. I agreed to interview with Morning Business Show, a national program I'd watched sometimes in my car during the homeless months. They wanted the woman in tech success story. I gave them something better. I told them the truth. I built this company sleeping in my car. I said on national television. My family didn't believe in me. Traditional investors didn't believe in me. I believed in the technology and the lives it could save. That was enough. The interview aired December 10th at 5 p.m. My phone exploded with messages from colleagues, investors, and journalists. At 9:47 p.m., I received a WhatsApp notification from a group called Rodriguez Family. I'd been removed from it in 2014. The message was from my mother. Darling, save December 25th for us. Your room is exactly as you left it. We miss you so much. Love, Mom and Dad. I stared at those 63 words for a long time. Then I called Marcus Thompson. I need you to monitor my parents' communications for the next 2 weeks. Legally, I know you have contacts who can track social media, public records, anything that doesn't require a warrant. What am I looking for? Proof they're planning something. He found it in 3 days. My mother had reached out to William Hoffman, a venture capitalist she'd met at a charity gala. Her Facebook message was direct. My daughter has a very valuable company. She's always been desperate for family approval. If we work together, we could all benefit from her success. Interested in discussing over the holidays? Hoffman had responded enthusiastically. My father's email to Leonard Pritchard was even better. Need conservatorship documents drafted. Mental health angle, Maya's instability, poor judgment, living in her car suggests incompetence. We can frame it as concerned parents protecting their daughter's interests. Time sensitive. I sat in my apartment reading these messages, feeling nothing. Not surprise, not hurt, just cold clarity. They wanted to take everything I'd built. They wanted to declare me incompetent, seize control of my assets, and install Derek, who couldn't stay sober for 90 days, as the face of my company. I forwarded everything to my attorney, to Johnson & Johnson's legal team, and to 3 separate cloud storage accounts. Then I revised the J&J acquisition contract. The lawyers thought I was crazy when I insisted on the anti-nepotism clause. This is highly unusual, one said. It could complicate the deal. It's non-negotiable. No member of my immediate family can be employed by any entity connected to Neuroscan for 50 years. Make it ironclad. They did. I also bought something I'd never owned, an expensive dress for Christmas dinner. Midnight blue, perfectly tailored. When you're about to destroy your family, you should look powerful doing it. The final piece fell into place December 20th. I went to Whole Foods and bought an organic free-range turkey for $230. Then I stopped at a specialty electronics shop in San Jose. I need a recording device that can hide in a turkey centerpiece, I told the owner. Something high quality that won't be detected. He didn't ask questions. In Silicon Valley, everyone has secrets worth recording. December 25th arrived with snow in the forecast. I drove to Scarsdale in a rental car, the turkey on the passenger seat, its hidden device already activated and linked to my phone. The mansion looked exactly as I remembered. Cold, expensive, empty of anything resembling love. I rang the doorbell at precisely 6 p.m. My mother opened it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Maya, you came. We're so happy to see you." Behind her, I could see them gathered in the dining room. My father in his Brooks Brothers suit, Derek in designer casual, Leonard with his briefcase, William Hoffman looking uncomfortable, an ambush disguised as Christmas. Perfect. The first hour was theater. My mother fussed over my coat. My father poured expensive wine. Derek pretended we'd always been close. Leonard Pritchard sat like a vulture in cashmere, checking his watch. William Hoffman made awkward small talk about the tech industry, clearly regretting whatever deal he'd struck with my parents. I played along, asking about Derek's recovery, complimenting my mother's interior designer, listening to my father explain his latest investment strategy. The turkey sat on the dining table centerpiece, its hidden device capturing every word. At 7:15, my mother finally showed her hand. "Maya, sweetheart, we've been talking," she began, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "Your success is wonderful, but we worry about you. All that stress, living in your car, building a company alone, it's not healthy." "I'm fine," I said, cutting into the roasted Brussels sprouts. "Are you, though?" My father leaned forward. "The instability, the isolation, the pressure. We think it might be time to consider bringing family into the business. Someone you can trust." Here it comes. "Derek has startup experience," my mother continued, "and he's been doing so well in recovery. A stable job would be perfect for him. CFO of a medical technology company would look impressive on his resume." I set down my fork carefully. "Derek embezzled over $400,000 from his last company." The room went silent. Derek's face flushed. "That's a lie. That was a misunderstanding with the books. You used company funds to pay cocaine dealers. The other founders settled quietly because our parents threatened to destroy them with legal fees." I turned to William Hoffman. "Did they mention that part when they pitched you on this scheme?" The venture capitalist went pale. Leonard cleared his throat. "Maya, I understand you're upset, but these accusations... I have bank records. I have testimony from 2 of Derek's former business partners who are willing to go on record now that they know he's trying to infiltrate another company." I pulled a manila folder from my bag, sliding it across the table. "I also have these." Leonard opened the folder. Inside were printouts of my parents' communications with him, the conservatorship request, the mental incompetence strategy, the timeline for seizing my assets. His hands shook. "You hired me to draft documents declaring your own daughter mentally unfit?" He looked at my parents. "You told me this was about protecting her." "It is about protecting her," my mother snapped. "She doesn't understand what she's gotten herself into. $300 million? She's 27 years old. She needs guidance. I needed guidance at 12 when you forgot to pick me up from school. I needed guidance at 17 when I lived in a hostel working minimum wage. I needed guidance at 22 when I slept in my car." I stood, my voice steady. "I don't need anything from you now." My father slammed his hand on the table. "We gave you everything. MIT, that car, this opportunity to come home. You gave me a scholarship I earned myself. A car you bought Derek first that he totaled, and an invitation to Christmas you sent only after you saw dollar signs." I looked at each of them. "Let me tell you what happens next." I pulled out my phone, showing them the recording app interface. Every word spoken tonight has been captured by the device in that turkey. Every scheme, every manipulation, every lie. I played back my mother's voice. "If we work together, we could all benefit from her success." Her face went white. "Johnson & Johnson closes the acquisition in 60 hours. The contract includes a clause that no member of my immediate family can be employed by any entity connected to Neurascan for 50 years. My lawyers drafted it specifically to prevent exactly what you're attempting tonight." "You can't do that," Derek said, but his voice cracked. "I already did. The papers are signed. The money transfers Friday." I looked at Leonard. "You should know I've filed a complaint with the New York State Bar Association about your ethical violations. Drafting conservatorship documents based on false pretenses is grounds for disbarment." The lawyer's face went from pale to gray. "And William?" I turned to the venture capitalist who'd flown across the country for my parents' con. I've sent recordings of my mother's initial approach to you to the SEC and the California Business Ethics Board. Conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted theft of corporate assets through coercion. They'll be very interested. William Hoffman stood abruptly, grabbing his coat. I was told this was a legitimate investment opportunity. I had no idea. He looked at my parents with disgust. You're criminals. He left without another word. Derek lunged across the table, scattering crystal glasses. You self-righteous bitch. You think you're better than us? I didn't flinch. I don't think it. I know it. I built something that saves lives while you destroyed everything you touched. I earned $300 million while you burned through $2 million on cocaine and failure. Yes, Derek. I'm better than you. He swung at me. I stepped back and he crashed into the china cabinet, shattering glass and porcelain. My mother screamed. My father moved to help Derek up, but I held up my phone. Everything's recorded, remember? Assault on video. I'd stay exactly where you are. Leonard Pritchard was already packing his briefcase, papers stuffed haphazardly inside. I need to leave. I have to contact my malpractice insurance. You do that, I said. My parents stood frozen in their formal dining room, surrounded by broken glass and shattered schemes. My mother's perfectly composed face had crumbled into something ugly and desperate. My father's commanding presence had dissolved into an old man realizing he'd finally met someone he couldn't control. Please, my mother whispered. We're your family. You were my family, I corrected. Now you're just people who share my DNA and tried to rob me on Christmas. I walked to the foyer, collecting my coat. Behind me, I heard Derek sobbing, my mother arguing with my father, Leonard's car starting in the driveway. The snow was falling heavier now, covering the circular driveway and the life I'd never belonged to. My Uber arrived exactly on time. I spent the next 72 hours in my Mountain View apartment, surrounded by lawyers and Johnson & Johnson executives, finalizing every detail of the acquisition. My attorney, Rebecca Walsh, had worked around the clock incorporating the recorded evidence into additional protective clauses. Your family could try to sue, she warned on December 27th. Claim duress, undue influence, anything to get a piece of the acquisition. Let them try. I signed another document. Every communication, every scheme, every lie is documented. They came to that dinner to commit fraud. They left with evidence of their own crimes. The Johnson & Johnson team was more direct. We need to ensure this family situation won't create liability for us, their lead counsel said during a video conference. The anti-nepotism clause protects our interests, but if there's ongoing litigation, there won't be. I pulled up the files Marcus Thompson had compiled. I have 15 years of documented neglect, evidence of embezzlement, proof of attempted fraud, and recordings of conspiracy. If my family wants a legal battle, I'll give them one they can't afford to lose. The counsel nodded, satisfied. On December 28th, Leonard Pritchard's law license was suspended pending investigation by the New York State Bar. The complaint I'd filed included not just his conservatorship documents, but evidence of other ethical violations Marcus had uncovered: conflicts of interest, misappropriation of client funds, document falsification spanning 20 years. My parents had chosen their lawyer poorly. December 29th brought a hysterical voicemail from my mother. Maya, please call us back. This has gotten out of hand. Leonard says we could face charges. Derek is having a breakdown. Your father's firm is asking questions. We need to talk about this as a family. I deleted it without finishing. That afternoon, William Hoffman's attorney contacted me. The venture capitalist wanted immunity from prosecution in exchange for testimony against my parents. He'd kept copies of every message, every email, every promise my mother had made about manipulating me. Tell him yes, I instructed Rebecca, but I want a detailed deposition. Every conversation, every plan, every lie. She smiled grimly. You really are destroying them. They tried to destroy me first. I'm just better at it. December 30th, Marcus called with news. Your brother checked into a hotel in Atlantic City yesterday. He's been gambling and using again. Lost $40,000 at blackjack. Credit cards are maxed. Document everything, I said. If he tries to claim he was coerced or not in his right mind during the Christmas dinner, I want proof he was already unstable and actively using. You think like a prosecutor, Marcus observed. I think like someone who spent 15 years being underestimated. The acquisition closed December 31st at exactly 9 a.m. Pacific time. I sat in Johnson & Johnson's San Francisco office, surrounded by attorneys and executives as we signed the final documents. $300 million transferred into accounts I'd set up specifically for this purpose, distributed across investments, trusts, and charitable foundations. I kept enough liquid assets to live comfortably for several lifetimes, and donated $20 million to MIT's scholarship fund for homeless students. By noon, I owned nothing of Neuroscan except pride. My phone rang continuously that afternoon. Journalists wanting statements, investors congratulating me, colleagues from the medical community celebrating. I answered the important ones and ignored the rest. At 6 p.m., my father called. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Yes? Maya, his voice was hollow. We need to meet. This has spiraled beyond what anyone intended. What you intended was to have me declared incompetent, seize my company, and install your addict son as a figurehead while you controlled $300 million. I was watching the sun set over Silicon Valley from my apartment balcony. It spiraled exactly where it deserved to. The SEC is investigating us. My firm is conducting an internal review. Your mother's real estate licenses are being examined. Do you understand what you've done? I understand perfectly. You tried to rob your daughter, and instead you lost everything. We're still your parents. You were never my parents. Parents show up. Parents remember. Parents choose their children over their addictions and schemes and egos. The sunset was beautiful, streaks of orange and pink across the winter sky. You were just people who happened to conceive me and then spent 27 years regretting it. Please. We'll lose the house, the lifestyle, everything we've built. Good. I ended the call and blocked the number. New Year's Eve, I spent alone in my apartment with expensive champagne and the knowledge that I'd won. Not just financially, though $300 million was satisfying. I'd won the bigger war. I'd proven that the invisible daughter, the forgotten child, the girl who slept in her car was more powerful than all of them combined. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Samantha Porter, the Stanford physician who'd been my first believer. Heard about the J&J acquisition. You're going to change medicine forever. Proud of you. I typed back, thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Her response came immediately. I didn't see you. You made yourself impossible to ignore. At midnight, I stood on my balcony watching fireworks explode over the Bay Area. Somewhere in New York, my parents were probably arguing about legal strategies and blame. Derek was probably high in some casino or rehab facility. Leonard Pritchard was probably drafting his response to disbarment proceedings. I felt nothing for them except satisfaction that justice had finally arrived. 6 months later, I sat in a coffee shop in Palo Alto reading the New York Times business section. The headline made me smile. Rodriguez real estate empire collapses amid fraud investigation. The article detailed everything. My father had been forced to resign from Morgan Stanley after the SEC investigation revealed a pattern of insider trading dating back 15 years. My mother's real estate licenses had been revoked in 3 states, following evidence of money laundering through property transactions. Their Scarsdale mansion was in foreclosure. Derek had been arrested in Atlantic City for possession with intent to distribute. His 4th rehab stint had lasted 12 days. Leonard Pritchard had been disbarred. I ordered another coffee and kept reading. The previous week, I'd started a new venture, a foundation providing resources for homeless individuals trying to build tech startups. Free co-working space, legal assistance, seed funding, mentorship. Everything I desperately needed and never received. The first cohort of 20 founders had moved into the facility I'd purchased in San Francisco. Young people sleeping on real mattresses, using professional equipment, believing someone saw their potential. Maya Rodriguez, a young woman, approached my table nervously. I'm in your foundation program. I just wanted to say thank you. I've been living in my car for 8 months, and your space, it saved my life. I gestured for her to sit. What are you building? Her eyes lit up as she described her app for connecting homeless individuals with immediate resources. I listened, asked questions, offered suggestions. When she left, she was crying with gratitude. I understood that gratitude. I'd lived it. My phone buzzed with an email from Rebecca Walsh. Your parents' attorney contacted me again. They want to meet with you. They're claiming hardship, asking for financial assistance. Should I respond? I typed back, tell them no. They have exactly what they gave me. Nothing. That afternoon, I met with the Johnson & Johnson medical team for an update on Neuroscan's integration. The technology had been implemented in over 800 facilities worldwide. In 6 months, The AI had helped diagnose over 12,000 conditions that traditional imaging had missed. 12,000 lives potentially saved because I'd refused to quit when I was sleeping in a Toyota Camry. The meeting ended with the medical director shaking my hand. "You've revolutionized diagnostic imaging, Maya. Your legacy will save hundreds of thousands of lives." My legacy. Not my family's name, not their money or connections or schemes. Mine. I drove home through Silicon Valley traffic, past the parking lot where I used to sleep, past the library where I'd coded for hours, past the Starbucks where I'd met Dr. Porter. Every location was a monument to survival, to the stubborn refusal to let neglect and betrayal define me. That evening, Marcus Thompson called with his final report. "Your father filed for bankruptcy this morning. Your mother is working as a receptionist at a dental office in Jersey City. Derek's in county jail awaiting trial. His public defender is negotiating a plea deal." "And the house?" "Auctioned last week. Sold for $6.2 million. After mortgage and liens, your parents cleared about $400,000. They're renting a 2-bedroom apartment in Yonkers. The Scarsdale mansion with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers and empty rooms where I'd learned to be invisible. Gone. Replaced by a modest apartment where my parents would spend their remaining years understanding exactly what they'd thrown away. One more thing," Marcus added. "Your mother tried to access Derek's old trust fund, but it turns out he'd drained it completely. She called the bank asking if there was any way to access your childhood trust fund, the one your grandmother set up. There is no trust fund. Grandmother left everything to charity." I paused. What did the bank tell her? That Maya Rodriguez had requested the account be closed in 2019 and all funds donated to MIT's scholarship program. He chuckled. "The representative said your mother started crying on the phone." Good. I ended the call and poured myself a glass of wine. Expensive Bordeaux from Napa that I'd earned myself. My apartment was small, but mine. My car was paid off. My bank account had more zeros than my parents had ever seen. Most importantly, I'd built something that mattered. Neuroscan would outlive all of us, saving lives long after everyone forgot the Rodriguez family drama. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Maya, this is your mother. Please. We have nothing. Derek needs legal help. Your father is sick with stress. We made mistakes, but we're family. Can we talk?" I read it twice, then blocked the number. They'd had 27 years to talk to me, to see me, to choose me. They'd spent those years choosing Derek, choosing money, choosing their egos and addictions and schemes. Now they had exactly what they deserved. Each other and nothing else. I deleted the message and opened my laptop, reviewing applications for the Foundation's second cohort. 300 people sleeping in cars, shelters, and streets, all trying to build something meaningful with technology. I'd fund 20 more. 20 more invisible people who'd learned they were never actually invisible, just surrounded by people too blind to see them. The Rodriguez family would fade into obscurity, forgotten by everyone except the creditors and prosecutors. But Neuroscan would continue. The Foundation would grow. The lives saved would multiply. That was the difference between us. They'd spent their lives taking, diminishing, destroying. I'd spent mine building something that mattered more than any of us. And in the end, I hadn't just won. I'd made them irrelevant. The sunset that evening was spectacular, painting the sky in colors my family would never appreciate because they'd never learned to see beauty that couldn't be bought or controlled or weaponized. I raised my glass to the horizon, to every parking lot I'd slept in, to every person who'd underestimated me, to every family that mistakes DNA for love. They got exactly what they gave, and I got everything I earned.